Hi everyone, I'm Chris from the Dice Tower, and if you're like me, then you loved Andor Season 2, maybe even rewatched Rogue One afterwards, some of Season 1, some of Season 2 again, and maybe you've been watching a lot of YouTube videos and reading articles discussing the political science behind it, analyzing the architecture and the clothing design, the weapon design, the real-life events that inspired some of the story beats of the show. And so I figured, I don't have all of those artistic and historical expertise, but I do know a bit about board games. So I'm going to recommend 10 games for you to check out if you really liked Andor. There were a lot of different considerations I put onto this list about why I was going to recommend these, but I really wanted to dive into the themes and the events that inspired Andor. And there's great historical war games that cover such specific and interesting events, but I wanted to make sure they also kind of had a more broad appeal and really dived into what makes this show intriguing. The idea of a show about spies, saboteurs, assassins, things that are maybe a little bit grittier on the side of war and just the real human element to it, but also some ideas of rebellion, resistance, and the like. So I'm going to start off with my number 10, which is my only Star Wars game to make the list. There's a lot of fantastic Star Wars games. This property has always inspired great video games, great board games, and such. I've been playing many different ones, but the one that really jumps to mind for this, number 10, is Star Wars Rebellion. Many people call this Star Wars in a box. And while it does have elements of the fantastical and the mythical, the Jedi, Luke Skywalker's a character leading the charge and everything, it also deals just a lot with the people that make the rebellion and the people that make the Empire. Several of the most important key players in this game are going to be characters like Tarkin and Yularen, like these characters that I always find to be some of the most intriguing parts of Star Wars. This is a 2-player game, or you can play it 4-player, 2 teams fighting against each other. The Empire is this epic war machine that can just bulldoze anything, but they have to find the hidden rebel base. The rebels are hidden, they're a little bit more spry. They have to subsist and survive a certain number of rounds, but also complete a certain number of objectives, these little hidden missions of theirs, in order to win the game. So the rebels will never going to truly just overpower the Empire. The Empire can build a few Death Stars. They can blow up Kashyyyk if they want to. They can wipe a planet off the face of the map, but they have to figure out where the hidden base is. They have to use those ISB-like feelers and deduction. This is a great game of cat and mouse that's also a grand strategy game. It represents so much of Star Wars. And as a bonus, a kicker on top of that, there is also a Rogue One themed expansion for this game that, even though the game's huge already, if you want more to it, it's there. This really does represent that idea of a rebellion just trying to get it what it needs done against such a stronger, more oppressive regime. So, number 10, Star Wars Rebellion. Number 9 is a game set in World War II, as are about half of the games on this list, for fairly obvious reasons. This is a solo game called Maki, about the French resistance. Now, the Gorman Front is very clearly in Season 2 based on the French resistance, the Maki fighters. Tony Gilroy has said as much, right? Drawn a lot of inspiration from that. And so, this is a little solitaire game. You play it against the systems of the game, which represent the systems of oppression. And as you place your agents out into key areas on the map, you're trying to get the resources you need to complete 2 missions, whether it's bombings or whether it's sabotage or trying to get certain intelligence and such. You are trying to build up this network, and you're trying to also grow the resistance front. And you're taking a lot of risks. You have to place agents into riskier areas to get more of the stuff that you need. You can place some agents along the path into unimportant areas that aren't going to yield you much, but it might just protect the agents going deeper in there. If you want to play a game that really gives you that feeling of the Gorman heist that's shown in Season 2, and also get a little bit more of that feel of the real-life historical events that inspired it, Maki is a great little game here, especially as the game intensifies as the local police forces are replaced more and more by staunch German soldiers occupying forces. This is a tense game. It's quick, it's got a small little footprint on the table, but it's plenty of fun, and as I said, I love that historical theming onto it, so that is number 9, Maki. Number 8 takes place during the U.S. Civil War and the antebellum period leading up to, and this is Freedom Underground Railroad. Now, this is not necessarily a game about boots-on-the-ground soldiers fighting for a cause, but this is about people who are of different social classes uniting together, some socialite characters that you can play in this game, a cooperative game where everyone is working together to free slaves from southern plantations through the Underground Railroad paths up north to Canada. It doesn't shy away from the intensity of the era, and it has a lot of key historical moments and figures in the event deck that you flip through, but it also puts you in the position where you have to make these decisions of how you're going to move these would-be liberated slaves to make sure they actually get there. Or do you sometimes have to make a choice where you distract some of the slave catchers and you sacrifice one to let 3 go by?
You think it's worth losing Krieger? What if it was me instead of Krieger? What would you do?
But that's one person. That's a human that you're subjecting to being caught and recaptured back into the system. It is a game that has that nice intenseness to it and treats the historical theme very well. As I said, this is not a game about soldiers and troops necessarily, but I do love the idea, as shown in Andor per Nemec's manifesto, that every act of rebellion, everything pushes that line forward. Freedom Underground Railroad also has an interesting financial element to it. Many games like this use kind of generic resources or action points as what you can allocate on your turn, but this game just straight up uses money. Part of what you do as you are helping these slaves escape is that you're also trying to use them to go around to different key cities to show that it's working, that the cause of abolition is something worth supporting financially. So Andor deals a lot with that. How do you fund a righteous resistance movement? Well, finances are a huge part of it as well. And sometimes you have to make those tough decisions that you don't want to, but at the end of the day, have to be done. So if you want to dive into something with that, you can check out Freedom Underground Railroad, my number 8. Back to World War II for my number 7. This is a game called Operation Barclay, a 2-player, head-to-head game where one player is the Allied forces trying to move from the northern part of Africa into mainland Europe. There's 5 potential lanes of movement that they could use, and they have to try to throw off the German player from being able to deduce what is their path of attack. This is an interesting poker hand-forming game where you play cards, a few cards onto the table face up, then you play the final few face down, and it's this idea of spyfare and counter-information, counter-espionage, trying to misinform the other player as to what the paths are going to be. It's a game that I enjoy, not as much as a lot of the other games on this list, but the thing that I do love about it is the thoughtfulness and the love that went into the production, the artwork, the pamphlet that explains the history of everything that the game represents, the spyfare of it. It's one of those games that is, I think, as much fun to read about and learn about as it is to play, but it represents those things really well. If you're the German player, you really do, in terms of Andor speak, feel like you're trying to do some of that ISB work. If you're a Partagas, you're the healthcare providers, trying to figure out and suss out the impurities there of that path. And so it's a neat head-to-head game, one that represents spyfare in a way that few other games do really well, very seriously. So Operation Barclay. One of the recurring themes of Andor is finding hope in an otherwise hopeless situation.
Rebellions are built on hope.
So my number 6 game comes from a series of games called the Valiant Defender series, where players take the role of characters who are fighting against overwhelming odds. The game that I'm choosing for this in particular, though, from that line, is Soldiers in Postman uniforms. This takes place on the very first day, officially, of World War II combat, where the German army invades the free city of Danzig and lays siege to the post office. Now, the post office, because of the rising tensions, was staffed by reserve NCOs who held off for 15 hours in siege against the German army and its reinforcements. And there's also other people that are in the post office, other people in the city who are in just this unfortunate situation. And it's such a heroic kind of last stand. Many of the people who were stationed there did die. Many who, after the surrender of 15 hours, were put on mock trial and killed for their act of resistance, and they were labeled as just a traitorous act. This is one of those things that history has looked back on decades later and deemed those people who were sent to death by firing squad to have been victims of judicial murder. This is just, it's brutal. And so obviously if you've watched season 2 and you have watched the Gorman massacre happen, this is not going to be too unfamiliar sounding from that. Just that initial act of oppression that lights the powder keg that causes so much more to happen. If you want to play a game where you represent, this is also a solo game, one player only, managing this, right? But if you want to play a game that represents fighting against those overwhelming odds, then the whole Valiant Defender series is great. And for me personally, the story, the representation of these real-life people who took part in this, the defense of the post office in Danzig, is highly inspirational, a game that maybe you should check out. There's a lot of great cooperative games where players all work together against the game, and no series has been more popular than the Pandemic line of games. But one game in particular that I'm recommending at number 5 here is Pandemic Legacy Season 0, a game that takes place during the Cold War and features spyfare. You are operatives with multiple aliases over the course of this campaign. If you've never played a Legacy game before, what that means is that you are playing a campaign game that has a cohesive story where permanent changes are happening to the board and to your characters that you're playing through, and it all culminates in a satisfying ending. The Pandemic series is, yes, about fighting viruses, but this one in particular is also about spyfare, fighting against the Soviet subterfuge and the actions that are going on. You not only work as individual agents around the board, you work together as a team, but there's also whole teams of cleanup crew, Sintas, if you will, to come in and clean up whatever mess you leave behind. This whole game has it leans so well into that whole idea of creating different identities, being able to get into places you otherwise wouldn't be able to. The Varian skies and the Russian operatives that you can create yourself to be. I think that if you loved Andor, then you might have fun creating these fake passports and multiple identities for your characters to use and swapping between them as need be in the middle of a mission even. So Pandemic Legacy Season 0, my next pick. This next choice here is going to be the one that looks most out of place. This is called Root, a game about woodland might and right with cute little critters fighting each other. Why is this game on the list? Well, if you want to talk about resistance and rebellion groups, then the Woodland Alliance in the game of Root is an excellent representation of that. In the game of Root, there are 4 different factions vying for control of the woodlands. Actually, there's 3 vying for control, and there's also the Vagabond, who's just a war profiteer, which actually handles this theme in a more interesting and nuanced way than Star Wars Episode 8 did. But nonetheless, there are 2 groups. There's kind of the old guard, the eerie birds, and there's also the up-and-comers, the war machine, the industrialists, which is the Maki de Cat. This kind of almost feels like the holdouts of the Old Republic, and then the Empire coming in, going through, burning through, and mining everything they can for their war machine. But these are the established factions that start on the map fighting each other. The last group is the Woodland Alliance, the Rebel Alliance, if you will, who have no presence on the board. They're not a fighting military force to be reckoned with, but they have to grow support little by little and naturally from word of mouth and through other little causes. As soon as those little resistance pockets start popping up, the other factions have to wipe them out quickly, because if they do not, then those front lines start moving forward more and more rapidly. And the Woodland Alliance, as soon as they get a foothold, start to be a huge thorn in everybody's side, and it just grows naturally. And they're a huge threat once they're left alone for just a little bit too long. I love this idea. This game is inspired heavily by a series of games called the Coin series, or the Counterinsurgency games. And this is like the most approachable version of that. If you want to look into some of these games like Cuba Libre, these coin games or counterinsurgency games are far more historically steeped. But Root is the one that is the most approachable. Now, since I said that all of the factions play so differently, it's not wildly approachable, but it's still one I think worth looking at, worth checking out. And I just love that feeling of playing the Woodland Alliance and just starting to pop up and do that exact thing that rebellions need to do in order to succeed. So that's number 4, Root. One of my favorite rabbit holes I fell down while researching about World War II were the multiple assassination attempts on Adolf Hitler's life. That's why my number 3 is Black Orchestra, a game about double agents operating from within the Third Reich itself, attempting to overthrow or take out Hitler. Now, this game, Black Orchestra, allows you to play the roles of several of these key figures and try one of the many different plots. You can go around and you collect resources, the bombs, the firearms, the poison necessary to maybe poison his food or blow up his airplane or to do the famous Operation Valkyrie, the briefcase bomb. Maybe you're so desperate you just run and gun him in the street. This game, I love the history behind it. It does present it a little bit simplified. It refers to all of these people as heroes. Some of them were people who wanted to take out Hitler because they thought they could run the Third Reich better. But whatever the motivation, it is intriguing to see people operating from within a machine-like organization who realize that they're cogs within this war machine. They could be doing something different, sabotaging from within. I love that idea that, every act of rebellion pushes the line forward a little bit. So if you want to learn some cool history, play a tense cooperative game, everyone again working together, avoiding the Gestapo, trying not to get burned, and then ultimately having a fun handful of dice that you chuck as you try these different plots here, as it gets more and more desperate. Man, the event deck in this, as you go through it and the progress of World War II happens before your eyes, and you can try to change the tides of the war ahead of time. I really love Black Orchestra. The number 2 game I'm recommending takes place during the Spanish Civil War, a lesser known, a lesser studied period, at least for me personally. This game is titled Resist, with an exclamation point. This is a solo game, again, where you are playing a hand of cards against these missions that you're trying to accomplish as you're trying to slow down or even overthrow the Francoist regime, a task that is not exactly possible per se, especially historically, but one that is important nonetheless. And I love that in this game, you have a handful of cards with 2 sides on them. You have one side that shows the character doing subterfuge, doing acts that are hidden, and on the other side you have the exposed character, the character who out and out says, I'm part of the resistance, I'm kicking down the door, guns blazing, or I'm doing my huge act of rebellion. And I love this idea that you can keep these cards cycling through your deck. You can keep reusing them as you use them for the weaker hidden side. But as soon as you expose a character, which you might need to take down a much larger and important mission, that character is removed from your deck. You'll never cycle through them again. You'll never have that agent to use again because they get taken out. So this idea too that these cards all have so much character to them. I love the fact that they're named. They have these amazing illustrations by Albert Montes. This is one of my favorite games in terms of the presentation of these resistance fighters. I love the clear analogy that occurs in Andor and in Rogue One, that the much larger open acts of rebellion are going to expose you, weaken you, but also push the line forward and accomplish so much more. I love this game. One of my favorite little solitaire games, Resist. We return to World War II for my number 1 pick. This is a game that I think is the most amazingly representative. It's unfortunately going to be the hardest to find as it kind of comes in and out of print. It's a small company that does this, Liberation Games. But the game is called Dutch Resistance, Orange Shall Overcome. This is one of the most emotionally affected I've ever been by a board game because you are these resistance fighters in the Netherlands during the German occupation. You are trying to commit these acts of non-violent resistance, and the characters that you play in this game, the events that go through the event deck as you unfold these encounters with the local police and the military forces are based on real history. These are not just fictitious representations, that are inspired by history. Many of these things are real events. These are real people. As you play through the game, you look at the back of your character card and you read their real story. I consider this one a step above just a fun, great play experience and more into just important. And I seldom say that about a game. If you love the idea of resistance and rebellion, if you love the idea that every person, no matter their walk of life, can do something meaningful and impactful, then this is a game that you should check out. There are 5 different scenarios in the base box, and you can try to convince a police officer who is unsure about his loyalties to come to the side of the resistance, you can try to pick up supplies and start the resistance movement from scratch. It is just amazing what this game represents. It is a cooperative game where everyone has to work together, and it has this great idea of shared action pool so that people can take the actions they need to. It's just a tremendous game. And I think that if you love that show, if you love the movie Andor and Rogue One, then this is one that if you can hunt down a copy, highly do recommend it. It's a long play experience, but I think that it's highly, highly worth it. So there you go. 10 games, 10 recommendations. As I said, there's plenty of great Star Wars games out there, and I hope that this list maybe expands your view to a couple of other historical and other games as well that fit those themes so well. So, until next time, my name's Chris Yeh, and remember that rebellions are built on hope.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.